Hi, Ben. Welcome back.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and today is just about Apache Shiro. And you are appearing at the Apache Shiro page because you were the last committer, or at least your pull request was the last.
That's nice to know. Actually, I'm also the last committer as a role that was given to me, and I was the last addition to the PMC for Apache Shiro.
What means the last? So there will be no one else, or
Oh no, the most recent one.
the most recent one? Okay, very good. Because I thought,
Yeah.
okay. Now, what is Apache Shiro?
Apache Shiro is well, you could call it a security library, but I would like to refer to it as a, let's say, authentication and authorization framework, or maybe even toolkit, because it gives you a lot of power in creating your own authentication mechanisms, authorization mechanisms, and it's very flexible.
Okay, but it's written in Java, I guess, right? Pure Java.
Yeah, it's completely written in Java.
And how I can integrate with Shiro. So let's say I would like to write a CLI Java code. Is still interesting to you, Shiro, or is more focused on web?
Yeah, it's one of the special things you can use Shiro for, because the most security frameworks I've seen are only for web. But actually, yes, you can use Shiro for CLI applications. So what Shiro is, it is just a library you can drop into your project via Maven or SPT or whatever you use, and the only thing you will need is a so-called environment loader and basic configuration, which is usually an .ini file, like a properties file. And that's it. That's all you need to go. And for web applications, you can use a restriction on URL patterns, and for CLI applications, you can use the security manager directly to ask for specific permissions.
So you mean the Java Security Manager?
No. I forgot to tell you, we do have our own security manager class, and it's completely unrelated to the Java security manager.
Okay, which is sounds bad, but it's very good because the security manager in Java is going to be deprecated, right?
Yeah, it's going to be deprecated, and well, there can only be one, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I would like to write, let's say, Hello World CLI application. So the first first line of code is main, and then system out println Hello Duke or Hello World, and somewhere in between I will have to integrate Apache Shiro. And so how to do this? So I will call the Shiro Security Manager and ask, am I allowed to call it, right? Or
yeah, we have different static methods you can access, and what you would usually want to do is ask if a user is authenticated or not. If it needs authentication, maybe sometimes you can use a guest role as well. You can ask Shiro if there's a specific role the user needs to be in, or if he needs a special permission he's got.
one question at the beginning: is it Shiro or Shiro? You know how it's pronounced perfectly?
It originates from a Japanese word, so from
okay.
what I know, it is Shiro.
Shiro. Okay, I didn't knew that this is a Japanese word. So okay, Shiro. Very good. So let's say okay, I need authentication. So what Shiro will do for me? I need a login first, right? So I will have to provide the credentials somehow. So how would it work with? Let's say username and password, the first one. So what to do?
With Shiro, you have quite a lot of options. So what we call it a realm if you have a source of information where you can validate your login credentials. That's what we call a realm. And actually, it's mostly the same wording as in the Jakarta security API. So you will know this terms already. And what the realm will do for you, it takes credentials, which can be a username and password, but could also be anything else. And it will try to match it against the known credentials stored in the RAM. So you can have, for example, hard-coded users and passwords in your Shiro.ini configuration. But you can also create a database or just ask your Active Directory or LDAP.
Yeah, so Shiro is just a library. It's not something, a process running. So I will have to tell Shiro whether I will use JDBC or files or whatever, right?
Yes, exactly. We have we have classes which can already do this for you. So you just need to configure those RAMs. You don't need to code it yourself. There are classes for generic LDAP authentication, for Active Directory authentication and authorization, the built-in Shiro.ini configuration with hard-coded credentials, but you can also roll your own. You can just extend the classes we already have and write your own.
So you have already run implementations which are swappable, so which is very similar to application servers, which what they provide.
Yes, but the main difference to application servers is that you have all the classes in your class path. So it is much easier to extend existing classes, where in application servers you usually only see the API you code against, but you don't see the implementation and hence cannot extend it.
And would Shiro also help me to encrypt the credentials somehow? Do you have support for that?
Yes, we do have support. It's a little bit, old-fashioned because the documentation is still telling you about MD5 and MD2, which you, of course, shouldn't use anymore, even with 1,000 rounds or so. But for Apache Shiro 2, we implemented modern password key derivation functions.
Okay.
So you can use Argon2 or scrypt or bcrypt, for example, to encrypt your passwords in a more secure manner or hash your passwords in a more secure manner. So you don't need to rely on old hash algorithms.
So it seems like an interesting library, or helpful and productive library. So I can just add, one-liner to ask Shiro and then use some configuration. By the way, how Shiro is configured? Is it a property file or how to specify everything?
Yeah, you can actually choose what you want to use. For example, you can do everything in code, which is very common for Spring applications, for example. So we do have a bridge for Spring and Spring Boot, which are, by the way, not the same. We get a lot of question that Shiro is not working for them, and mostly it's because they're using the Spring library instead of the Spring Boot library. But anyway, we have a CLI tool which will help you encrypt the passwords. So you only need to copy paste them into your configuration. If you use hard-coded users and passwords, otherwise you can probably just use any password encoder. You just need to make sure you use the correct format we use, which is very similar to what you find in a etc. shadow file on your Unix system.
Okay, but what is I would say the simplest possible start? So I would like to have the one-liner. Ask Shiro. I would like to be authenticated from my hello world, and I would like to hard code the in realm or whatever you call it. So what's exactly is to do? So I guess it's a Maven project. So I will have to add a Shiro dependency, right? So first,
so we have a few Shiro dependencies, but for a CLI application, you would just need a Shiro core, for example.
Very good.
And then you need a Shiro.ini file in your class path, so you can just put it in your resources folder. And you need at least it's been a while I coded CLI applications with Shiro. It's maybe not that common, but I think you need at least the user section, which is an ini section, and you use the format username equals password, and then you can add roles to the user with comma separate.
Okay.
Comma separation, yeah.
And from the source code perspective, how much code is involved in my main method? Roughly.
You need one method to load the configuration. And after that, you can just ask the security utility to give you the the information, whether the user is authenticated, whatever you want. There's a method security utils get subject, and then you can ask the subject whether he's got a specific role. Like I think the method is called isInRole, and then you just pass a role, and it will give you either true or false, or you can use a has role, which will an exception instead. If he's not
somehow similar to Jakarta or Java EE securities, similar principle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's easy to start. So that's always important that the first initial experience is hugely important. I would say
that's true. Yeah.
Okay, nice. But then you mentioned Spring Boot. This is what I'm usually. I have to admit I never did a Spring Boot project. So, but the microprofile is more interesting to me. Is there any integration with microprofile?
No, there's no specific integration. And I know you can integrate it with the application container using Jazz and JustPick. But we haven't written any integration for this yet. So your container will not know about Shiro.
Not a problem, because we have a great Jakarta EE security actually, where there is a password mechanism is called. And I think you could easily integrate with one-liner with Shiro, what you told me right now, because I will then ask Shiro, give me please your, I will pass the username on password, and Shiro will do whatever is needed to do. And what you said right now is it should be easy to integrate Shiro, because I could produce Shiro and eject it, for instance, right? So it is not a big deal. But
you don't produce Shiro like a CDI bean. But what you can do, you can absolutely write your own realm, which could be like a container password realm or something, or container validation realm. And if you only configure one, it will be the default one anyway. So you do not need any additional configuration. And the rest is done just for you. So you don't need to make Shiro aware of the methods you implemented.
This not, but I will need somewhere to boot Shiro. And this could happen either in application scope bean, which observes in startup, or in the old application with EJBs and a singleton and startup bean, which
The common way for Shiro to use in a Servlet or JAX-RS application is currently to use a web listener. And the web listener will actually start, kind of a singleton for you. So you don't need to fiddle with that. But it will also use thread locals to store incoming request data. So what you will also need is a filter to hook into the HTTP headers for authentication, obviously, or to grab the cookies which are sent along the request. But after that, all the state will be in a thread local. So as long as your request lives, you do have access to the information which is provided by the HTTP request.
But the web listener is invoked at the startup time to boot Shiro then. And then the servlet filter or JAX-RS container request filter would be used to give you all the request information which I could parse. So I could actually don't use the web filter part and just boot Shiro by my own, because we already discussed that in the CLI application is already working. And what I could do then is I could bind Shiro to request scoped or to transaction. So I don't have to use the servlet filter route. I could use the request scope route, because every request is a request. So, not the servlet filter route, rather than what I wanted to say, the thread local route. So instead of using thread local, I could use request scoped.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the moment, the way we wrote Shiro, I think that's not possible to use it in a way, because if you access the subject utils, or security utils, for example, they will always look for thread local, which is initialized by the web listener. So, we do have it on our scope. So we do have a version 2. It's not yet a roadmap. It's more like a brainstorming page. And one of the top topics is to make it more, CDI and JAX-RS centered, because that's what most people will use nowadays.
And what also interests me, because what we already discussed is part of, I would say, Quarkus and Helidon. So there is, the username and password authentication, they are already working. What's also interesting is, or becomes more and more interesting, is like OpenID Connect authentication. And is also something which Shiro is capable to do?
In theory, yes, but it's a little bit more complicated, because for OpenID, you will need some more requests. And at the moment, Shiro's implemented authentication mechanisms will only allow to do one request, which is usually asked in Active Directory, LDAP, or a database. So we haven't tried it yet, and we didn't get a request to implement it yet. But what will work well is for example, a JSON Web Token.
Exactly. So JSON Web, but JSON, the JSON Web Token is what you get from the how to call it, authentication provider, I think, right? From the backend service, but you need the flow, what you're describing, the entire communication back and forth requires multiple requests, which is not that easy, you're right, because you need a tighter integration with the runtime. You said something interesting, that the JAX-RS and CDI become more and more common. Why that? So you see an uptake usage of Shiro in CDI and microprofile applications, or?
I mean, we see it on the mailing list, the type of questions which are asked, which is mostly related to either Spring Boot or to JAX-RS and CDI.
Okay.
So I think it's a natural way to look more on more specific technologies which are used more. Than
sure.
Others.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you also see some uptake in JAX-RS and CDI. So I'm looking also at the contributors list, and what I also see is you are very active, but also the entire project is very active. So actually in 2020, a lot happened in the Shiro space, which is a good sign. So it is a vibrant project. Also, it has almost 4,000 stars, which is for a Java project incredible, I would say. This is really a popular Apache project and healthy project. So another question is, why it is used that much? I mean, what are the killer features of Shiro? Because most of the runtimes already come with authentication authorization. There is something which Shiro can do, which application server cannot. So what's the added value?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. We do have some specific things that we can do maybe a little bit better or more intelligent than other frameworks, which might be not that common to use, but if you need it, you should use Apache Shiro probably. And to give you a few examples, one thing where Shiro really excels is the permissions. Most frameworks I know only go down one or two levels, which are roles and groups. And most of the time they are even the same. And Apache Shiro will step down one more level to permissions. So in Apache Shiro, a role can consist or contain one or multiple permissions. And permissions are a very interesting idea because they in themselves can contain various expressions. We call them wildcard expressions. And what they do, it's actually a colon separated list where you can ask Shiro what exactly a user may or may not do. So if you think about a role, it's like what a person or a subject is allowed to do in a sense of what's his like daily activity.
Come back to the CLI. So I have hello world with two methods, get message and set message. So everyone should be able to invoke get message to see the hello world. So we did some refactoring and set message only by the admin. Now go ahead.
So you have two options. Option one would be to ask if the user is in the role admin. And this is something you can do with like every framework. But now imagine there are multiple types of admins, or the admin role is not enough to differentiate between if the admin may set the message on the CLI application or only on the web application. So maybe you do have another application, a web application, and you have different admins for this, and they the permissions are not bound to the role alone. In that case, you can ask Shiro has permission, and you would write probably CLI colon write colon message, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So what this means is the other way around, actually. Message colon write colon CLI. So what this means is if you have the permission to write a message, and on the CLI, which is like a discriminator, the third part is the discriminator. Then you can write the message, and the web admin may not have this permission.
Okay. What does reminds me is about the security on AWS cloud. It's almost identical. So we have IAM policy. This is called, and we have users. We have roles are a little bit different. Groups, let's say groups, and then we have permissions. And the permission is comma separated, actually, and also with expressions. And it starts with a resource, and I can say colon and more specifying which resource. Even I could use on REST API, because if you consider this from the RESTful perspective, you can say a resource is, let's say, a folder, and the specific ID, right? So I'm accessing the folder with the name, let's say, Hello World. So I can be very specific, and this seems like what Shiro is also doing. So if I would use the permissions on the JAX-RS level, then I can have very fine-grained security on ID level, right? Because usually I would use in Java EE, I can say admin can only write to the folder or read the folder. But with Shiro, I could say the admin is able to write to the folder with the ID 42 under these conditions even, right?
Exactly. That's the whole point of permissions. And you can even fine-tune even more. Like you can use as much colons as you want, and you can use commas to add multiple values. So you don't need to create a permission for each ID. You can just use a colon, a separated list for the IDs, for example. And maybe you know Nexus by Sonatype, the artifact manager. They use Apache Shiro to implement the roles and permissions. So if you have ever used Nexus, you will see the same terminology, roles and permissions, and you can fine-tune which user can access. Example, breakdown on specific artifacts, for example, or specific repositories.
So I would say the killer use case of Shiro is the permission language, with or how to call it? How you call the language? Permission.
Just permissions, yeah.
Permissions.
You can even use your own implementation. Wildcard permission is just the default implementation. If you like the colon separated language or grammar better, you can implement it yourself. There's nothing preventing you from this, and it will integrate just fine.
Okay. Can you also call out from the permission language to your own methods? Because you could say, okay, I'm only allowed if the environment ships with this, and you know what I mean? So what you could do, for instance, $ and brackets, and say, I have a placeholder for a dynamic value.
That's an interesting question, because I never tried it. I'm doing it personally, I'm doing it the other way around. I'm building the permission strings based on a dynamic input. Yeah. For example, in my company, we categorize the applications we have, and based on which AD group a user is in, you get access to a specific set of applications, to a category, and you can even fine-tune it down to the application itself, not just the category of applications. And you can break it down to the stages, like development stage, integration stage, production stage, so you cannot access every configuration.
So how your string is looking right now? So your expression.
So the first part of the string is the subject you want to alter. In this case, it would be like CI, configuration item.
Okay.
Then there's a colon, and then there's the operation you want to do, which can be a asterisk for placeholder, everything, or you can put in the specific operations. it's not an enum. You can put in everything you would like to have there, like write or read or print or whatever. So CI colon asterisk, for example, and then a colon, and then the app name category colon and the stage.
Okay.
That would be a valid wildcard permission string in Shiro.
Okay, and you are saying you are building this dynamically.
Exactly.
Okay, this is interesting. So because let's say on this IAM on AWS, they this would be, you could do this dynamically at deployment time, but not at runtime. And at runtime, you would use placeholder. So you can say, I'm only allowed to be invoked from this VPC, from this network. And what this current network means is encoded in this placeholder, or this is how you would do this with Shiro. You can say I'm only allowed to do this, I don't know, in this language, and the language is in the environment.
So if you use Shiro, you need to write your own classes at some point anyway. So I think you can just integrate your placeholder as a template and then use this template string to build the actual Shiro permissions, for example.
Maybe I know what I mean. What do you mean? Sorry, just to understanding. We could specify another slot, and the name of the slot would be like a current network or current user, whatever. And what current user means would be implemented in a Java class, right? Very simply.
Yeah. So I would probably write a service for this, which create the permissions. But maybe it works with your own wildcard implementation, which can do the resolving. To be honest, I never tried. So I think you can just extend the wildcard permission and write your own lookups. I know lookups is no, but we should maybe not use because of the log4shell vulnerability. But yes, I think that would also be possible. Just extend your wildcard permission and implement lookups.
Yeah, of course, man. Bugs happens everywhere, so it's not like the time to prohibit lookups there. But it's also useful. But okay. But let's. This was just very specific question. I was just curious, and you are right. This is different use case because on Amazon this is locked down environment, and now we are more in control. So you cannot extend easily IAM, but you can absolutely extend Shiro. So there is a less need to be dynamic or generic, and it's of course safer, because then I can just I know the string in advance. But what I wouldn't do in one point of time to tell Shiro what write means, right? Because I have an operation set message, let's say in web or CLI, doesn't matter, and Shiro has no idea what this operation set message or this Java method set message has something to do with the string write in the expression, right? How to bound them? Annotations, I suppose, right? Or something like this.
I wish. No, we are not using annotations besides JAX-RS endpoints. So there are actually no annotations like in the Jakarta security API. You can, yes, you can use them for JAX-RS. That's actually true. You can annotate your endpoints with add requires permissions. And then you can just list permissions which are required to the user must have to access the endpoint, but you can also do it in code. For example, .has permission, and then you can just build it yourself. So resource name write for a post operation, for example, and discriminators.
But even better, what I could do, I could implement a CDI interceptor, which listens to my own annotations or is even bound to the annotations, then has access to the thread local, of course, is executed in the same thread. So I can pull the current context from Shiro and pass the information from the annotation, and then I'm done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be possible. But you can, you can use the annotations we already have for JAX-RS, if that's enough for you.
Yeah.
But I think your method would also work with methods called by CDI beans.
I mean, for the JAX-RS, we get already very fine-grained. Again, we not only get who can write or who can read. We get the granularity who can write which ID, which is more fine-grained than this is this is actually the killer feature, because this is not supported by Java EE or Jakarta EE and microprofile.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
One level deeper with the permissions, we could have, let's say, row-specific security, right? So I can permit specific users to only read specific IDs if I like.
Absolutely. So back to my example, we allow users only to read configuration for a specific category of applications in specific stages. Yeah, that's exactly what you are suggesting.
So, and this is this is what I see. So I would say the Shiro is less about security and more about expressions, right?
Yeah, maybe. So I think the answer is yes and no. It depends what your use case is. If you don't need the permissions, you will have like no contact with permissions. Maybe you don't need those fine-grained permissions, and you only need them to a level which is similar to the roles. And you want just to keep your application extendable, which open for extension, which is always a good thing. Then you're good to go with permissions or with roles. Both would work. And most of your configuration work would be probably to set up the realms and the URL configuration.
But this is what I usually get with Quarkus, Helidon, and the others, right? So this is not like I wouldn't never use Shiro for that. But with the permissions, this is where it is really a unique feature.
Yeah, I think that's just one of two unique features. So I know you can use multiple realms with the Jakarta EE API. But with Apache Shiro, you are like a little bit more flexible with how you use them together. So if you have multiple realms, for example, and I think this is another point where Shiro really shines, you can just use the multiple realms and decide later what to do and when to use them. So there's a realm manager class, which you can extend, which allows you to say if authentication in realm number 1 fails, then use realm number 2 and number 3, or you can say if the user's prefix has got a prefix like a domain name from an Active Directory, use the realm with a specific attribute which matches the domain name. And I think this would be a little bit harder to do in the Jakarta Security API.
In the Jakarta EE8 Security API, have you looked at that? Because this is actually pluggable. So what you could do is, this is a perfect place to plug in the Shiro, because we have all the information, and then we can just use Shiro as pluggable realm mechanism, right?
Honestly, don't know if you can use Shiro as a realm. Well, it's probably down to just implementing the interfaces, but yes, I guess so. That would be another possible connection for Shiro and the security API.
Because of what's very popular is the HTTP authentication mechanism, and this is based on the Jakarta EE and how it works. So you're implementing one method, and in this method or in this class, dependency injection is already working. And what usually happens, if there are no additional requirements, you can inject your own user management. This can be whatever you like. So what you have at this point in time, you have the entire information about your request, so username and password, and you can ask whoever you like to provide the token or whatever you get back. Is it authenticated or not? So this will be the perfect place, to plug in Shiro, because then the Shiro can do the delegation between realms. I don't have to implement the realm by myself, or even use just Shiro as a complete facade, and this facade will act as an authentication and authorization provider.
Yeah, that would be perfectly possible, if I'm not mistaken. And I must admit, yes, you're right. The authentication mechanisms in Jakarta EE are much better than those in Shiro, because you have more than just a username and password token, as we have. They are more easy to use because of the enums and annotations. For example, if the user's giving you a bearer token, you can more easily decide in the Jakarta EE Security API which realm to use. You can do it with Shiro, but you will have to do a lot of inheritance work from the existing classes, and you need to know at least some internals of Shiro to get it working.
What actually Shiro does mean? So what is it in Japanese? You said this Japanese word. What does it mean, Shiro?
Yeah, it means castle.
Castle.
So
Okay.
it's like a fortification. Yeah.
Fortification. Okay. So why we got so many commits in 2020 in Shiro? So what was like major refactoring, or what you did 2020? All of you. It seems like there was a spike of interest in 2020.
If you are looking at the main branch, we did implement some enhancements. For example, the hash mechanisms we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Francois is working at a new module layout. So the Maven modules get reordered, and he also works on the OSGI modules we have. And I think this is the main part. The other commits were actually mostly in the 1.8 branch, which is for the most part about security fixes nowadays.
Okay, but still, it's interesting. Okay, so we have now the expression language. Is this the only killer feature of Shiro, or there is more? Only. I mean, this is a huge feature. This is why, yeah.
I think the way you can handle ramps is still another interesting feature, because it's although the way you use it in Jakarta EE is a little bit more intuitive. I still think the way you can define them in Shiro is a little bit more flexible.
What does it exactly mean in Shiro? What do you have to do to manage the realms, or what?
So let's assume you're using the default shiro.ini configuration file.
Mm-hmm.
You can just write down the realms you will be using, and they will automatically get picked up by Shiro.
Mm-hmm.
If you want them to be in a particular order, you can just set the realms manually using realms equals and then the references to the realms, mm-hmm. and this will modify the list Shiro. The order Shiro will see them in and try them in, depending on what realm manager you use. So, if you can use multiple realm managers, for example, if you specify multiple realms, Shiro will try to authenticate against all of them, and you can say whether the authentication should be successful if one succeeds, or one fails, or all fail, or all succeed. Mm-hmm. All fail makes no sense, obviously. And you can, as I said earlier, implement your own realms in Realm Manager, which will even dynamically look at the realms you handled over, you defined.
Mm-hmm. I just took a look at the Jakarta EE 8 spec, and mm-hmm. the realm itself is called Identity Store. This is the interface, and you will have to implement that. And I think the most important method is called validate, where you pass a credential and you get credential validation result. So I would say to provide a wrapper is not a big deal, right? So we could actually reuse either the Shiro realms, or use even Shiro with the configuration file you mentioned right now. So because I could just wrap the entire Shiro framework and say do whatever you would like to do behind the scenes, and I will just call you and resolve the identity, right?
Yeah, I think that should be perfectly possible.
Yeah. Because if you say, no, I have already a scenario where all the, let's say you have in your work, the chain of realms already set up in Shiro, and now we'd like to integrate Shiro with Quarkus, let's say. And Quarkus comes with the HTTP mechanism, and you need an easy way to integrate. So what I will do is I will create a Java class which wraps Shiro somehow, injects to Quarkus, and then in the methods where in the HTTP authentication mechanism, I will call the class. Yeah, am I allowed or not? Give me bitte give me please the validation. Give me please the validation result, and I get the result back. This is what I'm just trying to understand, because Because you're hesitating a little bit, so it seems like. But for me, from technical perspective, it should work, right? I could just use the entire Shiro realm resolving functionality from outside, right? So it should be possible.
I'm hesitating because I think you will need to extend Shiro quite a little bit.
Okay.
For example, the only credential we know out of the box is the username password credential. So if you do use
well, let's stick with that. Just with that. So, I mean, keep it simple. So, just for this use case, this is, I would say, still the majority of all use cases username and password, right?
Yeah.
I would just use that. So, and I can actually do the credential. It could be a username password credential. This is the name. So, let's stick with that. I have username password credential. I know it. This is what then it should be simple, right?
I guess so. So I've never tried it, but yeah, that sounds like a really interesting use case, and for some documentation. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, very good. Because this was just for my technical understanding how to plug Shiro into existing Java EE and so Quarkus and Helidon and all the other projects. Because
so the most beneficial way would be probably to use Shiro as a provider for the Jakarta EE security API. But at the moment, Shiro does not implement those interfaces, so you can't use Shiro directly. You need the layer in between, which is currently, I think it's called Soteria.
Soteria, exactly. So I'm already looking at the source code on GitHub. I will put it in the show notes. And this is what I talked about. The identity store is actually this what Soteria or Java E8 security or Jakarta EE security or what Quarkus HTTP authentication mechanism offers. And for me, the interface is the validate interface I told you right now. And if I will wrap the entire Shiro framework inside the implementation, it should actually already work. So from my point of view, because in this example here, I have a method called credential validation result, and what they do internally, if credential instance of username password credential, then they have username or password, and then I could just pass the entire thing to Shiro, and this would be for me exactly the same what we talk about if CLI application, right? So I have to be a little bit careful with threads, but it should actually work.
Yeah. At this point in the web application, you won't be using any threads anyway, probably. But yes, I think that sounds like a really good and interesting idea. And to be honest, I never tried it.
And I actually saw Shiro a lot in my projects because many developers were inspired by the expression language. So this is what I saw. They try now to imitate the expression language to have permission. Sometimes they use Shiro, but this is the interesting part. What is actually, very briefly, the history of Shiro? Because it is 10-year-olds, roughly, the framework, right?
Yeah.
But how it started?
I think we just celebrated our 11th birthday, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. It started like JSecurity and was submitted to Apache, and this was like a better alternative to Jazz. This is what my understanding was, right?
This is also my understanding. So if I'm not mistaken, Apache Shiro was founded by Les Hazelwood, who also worked for the Jakarta EE security API, by the way. So I do see a lot of parallel terminology and things on our version 2 roadmap are similar to what the Jakarta API already does. And Shiro was created because they tried to find something easier for developers to use. So if you want to set up Jazz or JazzPig, you have to do a lot of configuration work and configuration files, which are not easy to do in code, if at all. And I think this is why Shiro or JSecurity was created in the first place. And so it's nowadays used a lot in many projects for this reason.
Mm-hmm. So but why he created that? Was it too much vacations, or it's already interesting to know why someone create such a thing, because there's a lot of work to do, right? So if you are open source contributor, it's not like you're doing this just 5 minutes a day. You need a little bit more time. So the history, the background.
Yeah, because Jazz and JustBig was hard to use. So
Yeah.
with Shiro, you get much easier interfaces to work with, for example.
Yeah.
And uh, since you have the thread local backed subject store in your request, it's very easy to in any point in the code to access the list of roles
Ah,
which the user has. So
the initial idea from them was to bind the subject or the authentication information to a thread, right? This was
yeah.
the. Mhm.
So I think it's for a developer much easier to configure a Shiro.ini file
Yeah.
or work with a pre-made one if you have, for example, a framework which predefines one.
Mhm.
And in your code, you can just use those simple methods which are not there by default for JS or JavaScript.
But did they work for a large project where they wanted to achieve something? I mean, still, YAML is hard, but I don't do nothing about that. I just ignore YAML if I can, right? This is my I don't writing now open. It's not starting an YAML simplification open source project. I just ignore it. So why they wanted to simplify the jazz?
That's something I don't really know, but considering that Les has founded his own company Stormpath at the time,
Okay.
I think it would be a good guess that he needed it for his own work anyway.
Okay, this is actually a good thing because yeah, um, 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 I was actually I was asked by them to review at the very beginning some code, but I had absolutely no time. But I will have to reinvite them or invite them to the podcast. Maybe they can reveal what
Yeah,
was the start.
absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, perfect. Now, why you contributed that much to Shiro? Is it too much vacations involved, or what's the problem? Or your trumpet is broken, or what happened?
No, actually, I got in contact with Shiro for a project in my company,
Hmm.
as I told earlier. So
Hmm.
and it did lack some mechanisms at that time, which are present by now. But at the time, I wasn't able to configure the realms the way I wanted without writing new code. And some external contributed the code to the code base of my company, and I looked at it and was like, I think I know what it does, but I maybe could write it in a better way.
Hmm.
And by the way, I have this bug and that issue and another question, and so I asked on the bug tracker for support of those things, and they asked me, which is very common for open source projects, to provide a pull request if possible. And yeah, that was my first pull request. So I rewrote the logic I found earlier, and I also opened some tickets, and I helped them to hunt down the bug I was looking at. Well, we didn't found it until recently, so
Okay.
it did stay open for a few years, but I got kind of attached to the project, and I was able to answer some questions. I had some fun in it, and yeah, I spent just a few hours a week, maybe even about the same amount of time I would usually spend at the rehearsal from our orchestra.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I didn't spend too much time on the project. It was just fun, and it's kind of a hobby.
So what kind of bug was it? Concurrency?
I wish. No, actually, if you did not have defined a JSession ID cookie or a JSession ID parameter on your project, and you authenticated via HTTP form request,
Mhm.
your post content would be garbled. So the post body would be decoded but not re-encoded again.
Mhm.
So the thing Apache Shiro tries to do is to figure out whether there's an existing session, and
Mhm.
it will obviously try to find a JSession ID somewhere. So it could be in the path, it could be in a cookie, it could also be in a form parameter in the
Mhm.
form post body you're submitting to the server. And when it tried to look there, it needed to decode the HTTP request body, but it did not re-encode it. And so it was later by the application server decoded a second time, which led to those interesting errors.
Oh, it reminds me in some JSON problems I had because I decoded JSON twice. Also a common one, right? Or encoded twice, probably. Because then you get double encoding. Another thing Shiro might be useful, and it is solved mostly in the clouds, secret injection. So I can inject secrets to application servers or to microprofile config. I could actually also, because you mentioned, there is encryption involved and there's the entire tooling involved. So we could actually extend microprofile with an own config provider, which injects secrets, right? And using Shiro behind the scenes to maintain the secrets could be also interesting, right?
Oh, that's a very interesting idea. For that, I would probably use or create another project because you wouldn't need the rest of the Shiro framework there. But I think I would use it the other way around, to be honest. So I would probably use microprofile config to inject configuration items into Shiro.
Yeah, of course. You will need something to configure Shiro, so you can do this. Yeah. But use Shiro as credential encryptor, right? So could also be interesting.
I mean, what Shiro does is just to apply well-known algorithms like scrypt, decrypt, Argon2.
Yeah, sure. But try it with Java. You will have to write some code. If Shiro could read from one file, encrypt it, and inject it, this would be, or just what I did recently in the cloud. I say generate secret, and the secret was used in the database. And in Quarkus, I had no idea what the secret actually is. So you could use Shiro for that. So just generate me a secret, and the secret is going to be used behind the scenes, right? Something like this, or more simplification around.
But I wonder if application servers won't already do this for you. For example, we talked about OpenLiberty, and you can store a password with an AES prefix, which are just encrypted, not hashed. But let's say you are using this in a JNDI value. You can just access the JNDI value probably.
Sure, but this is OpenLiberty feature. But if you would extend microprofile, then you are portable everywhere. So just an idea, but
that's true. Yeah,
you don't have to do this. It was just an idea how to use Shiro, and of course injecting configuration into Shiro also very interesting because then I can configure all my Realm stuff and with microprofile config, and I could even extend the type like Shiro environment, and I could inject the entire ANI or INI. Sorry, not ANI, INI file.
Yeah. So we do already have some basic support for the INI configuration from environment variables, for example. But you need an additional library for this to work. And support for microprofile config would be very beneficial in this case because it doesn't bind you to how you specify the property. For example, with microprofile config, you can use either the environment or you can use a system property or even a configuration file. And with Apache Shiro, you will need to know where the variable is located. So you would need to write $brace and env colon and the variable name. Yeah, so yes, that would be a very good idea.
Okay, perfect. So nice. So we cover a lot of ground with Apache Shiro. Would like to add anything, which we forgot to mention, which you say, okay, this is a great Shiro feature, but I forgot it completely to cover.
Yes, we do have some things on our roadmap, which might be interesting, depending on your use case. So we would like we do have the idea to implement event-driven design at some point, if needed. So if your application is depending on a lot of events already, that could be beneficial. And we were also thinking about renaming some of the existing classes to help developers gain access to Shiro. Because the first time you look at Shiro, it's quite complicated to understand, because you need to know what a subject is, what a principle is. And you will also need to know the difference between roles and permissions and so on. You need to know what a realm is, authorization, authentication, and all that stuff. And by renaming just a few of them, I think that would be really helpful to users or to developers.
Another idea could be to use the expression language from Shiro and submit it as a standard to microprofile, like permission-based security, because there is nothing like this. And Nexus is already using that, and it seems like an interesting idea, because Shiro is 11 years old, and now submitting this as a standard, just the language, could be also interesting, because then it would...
You mean to microprofile or to the Jakarta Security API?
I would start with microprofile, because they are less political, I would say. Political, they have to be less stable. And therefore, there's and because you can iterate faster, and in one point of time they will decide whether they will port it back to Jakarta e-security or not. But it's really useful, because in some project we get exactly the question about permissions. And if it's a part of the standard, it's really easy, I say, okay, this is part of the standard, just take it. Otherwise, if I mention Shiro, no one knows Shiro usually. Say, okay, well, what is it, and is it secure or not? And then, the entire discussion is over. And what I would just, submit is just very narrow spec regarding the expression language, because I would say this would be a good start, right?
In which part of microprofile would you think to submit it? Do you think of creating a new microprofile standard, or
they have just monthly calls? I would just join and say, just it's a very interesting project. I would also ping on Twitter Emily Jung, for instance, and she will tell you immediately what to do. So she is now the
But in which microprofile spec would you want to use the
standalone spec? Maybe I will start with standalone. Why not?
I see. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because permission based, I would say there is some dependency on security, but if JPA is also dependent on JDBC, and it didn't extend JDBC. And for me, the permission based is extension from the Java E8 security, and this is the questions regarding identity store and everything. It could be just an extension. So I would say permission based could be interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So. To be honest, this is probably some of the only features which I would miss from the Jakarta Security API at some point.
Yeah.
And to be honest, with less on the board, I would guess it would come sooner or later anyway. But that's just my guess.
Yeah, the question is how active is Lester? We have to check it, right now.
Yeah.
But, and you can submit it. You can try to extend Jakarta e-security with that, but microprofile would also work. So do whatever. I would, the project for you should be fun. I would do whatever is fun. So if Mike and if you ping Emily, say, okay, sure, do it, then do it, and the less friction you have, the better it is, I would say, right?
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay. What you asked a few minutes ago was what Shiro will do for you, if there are any other things that are good, very special or killer features in Shiro.
Yeah.
And I would like to answer what Shiro does not, or maybe partly do for you. For example, if you ever coded a PHP application, for example, you will see a lot of the times that your sessions will be stored in a database. So you can use any number of servers, and your authentication will survive a switch of the backend. So it's not just one backend which knows your session. It's all backends, because they look up your session in a database. And this is something Shiro cannot do with a database as of now. So we do have support for EHCache or for Hazelcast, but actually not a database. And I think this is a little bit counterintuitive if you encounter Shiro at first. But But I think most users I know are using a cache to back the sessions anyway. So this is something you should be aware of.
Yeah, but this is absolutely fine because for me, the session should be ephemeral, not persistent. If I need persistence, I would go to JPA. So for me, decision is fine, and I wouldn't even store the session in a cache because if the server dies, the user will have to relog in. This is all I would say. Yeah.
This is an interesting point if you have multiple application servers, for example, for load balancing.
Yeah.
Because if you are hitting another backend, the user would need to log in again.
Or you have session affinity, in the application load balancer.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, this is what yeah. Great. But I would say the future is anyway, if you can encode the entire state in JSON Web Token, there you can have additional realms with the state, and this is good placeholder for the session, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The JSON Web Tokens only have one single drawback. The HTTP header cannot be maybe as long as you might need it, because you can probably fit your roles inside, but you may not be able to fit all your permissions inside. So you would either need to work with multiple tokens, depending on the use case, or you would need to hit the database at some point anyway. But you're probably hitting the database anyway.
Perfect.
Or the identity store. Yeah.
So it was fun. Where people can find you on the internet?
They do find me on Twitter, bmarvel, and I occasionally also Twitter from the Apache Shiro account if we have new releases, for example. And I do have a blog, blog.bmarvel.de, where I write about a little bit Java EE or of course Apache Shiro. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, nice. So nice chat. So now we covered Shiro a lot, and very useful. Yeah, we see already on the stars, right? Very useful Java framework, almost 4,000 stars, which is on GitHub, which is not usual for Java. And so thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam.